I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at God Debbie, here with John Hlavin, co-showrunner of Showtime's The Man Who Fell to Earth. John, a few weeks ago, you joined an exclusive Q&A screening for the show in which you mentioned that you signed up after the pilot was written and you were immediately drawn to the characters and that it was about something. What did you mean by that?
So I've known Alex for 10 years, Kurtzman, one of the writers of the show. And I knew of Jenny Lumet, obviously, by reputation. So when I was asked to look at the material, I was developing something else for his company and I read it. And the thing that I obviously knew the book and I knew the movie, but the thing that the script did that I had not seen in a long time was it was completely character focused. Like it was not a remake of the book or the movie. It was a sort of sequel to the book and the movie. So it wasn't like I was like, oh, I know where this is going because I've read the book and I've seen the movie. I had no idea where it was going. And I was still compelled. And that is a very tricky thing. That's a tricky algorithm to put together. So when I finished the script, then I went back and reread the Tevis novel, which I hadn't read since high school. And I instantly connected with the novel again to sort of what was going to happen in the TV show when I sat down with Alex and Jenny and we talked at length about what the plan was. It changed about a million times, but at least initially when we talked about, okay, this is the direction the show is going, it still felt very, very character focused. And I think that is the thing that what it surprised me, even in breaking the show and then in making the show, was how we would continually talk about what characters were doing. And as Alex said, put orange cones around kind of typical or cliched plot moves that we'd all seen a million times, and to avoid them at all costs. It's a very tricky algorithm. And if I do say so myself, I think we achieved it, at least as I'm watching it now with my wife who had never seen it, on Sunday nights, she's very compelled. So I think we crossed the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no idea where this show is taking me. And, the difference between episode 1, 2, and 3 so far is just mind-boggling in tone, in the way it looks, the way it's shot, the new characters come through that I am just really dying to know what's going to happen towards the end. And that doesn't happen very often. So as you mentioned, this is not a remake of the 1976 David Bowie classic. It's a continuation of the story in which Alex and Jenny capture the spirit of the original film, but take this idea in new and perhaps an unexpected direction. What are your thoughts on why this material was so ripe for a revisit decades later?
Well, the biggest thing, and the world is, the world changes about every 15 minutes now. So it's sort of hard to keep up with all the change. And this was we started pre-COVID. We had 5 months of writing, and then COVID, March 19th was when the writer's room was shut down because of COVID. And that began, I think, effectively 2 years of COVID stuff. So what happened is we had broken half the season, COVID happened. So we sort of started off with a story that's still very much about, how we're treating the planet, basically. And I think that's, I don't care what your politics are. I think it's very hard to look at the planet now and think we can sustain this course, whether you think it's human made or natural, et cetera. We are, particularly in the West Coast where I live, we're really seeing a lot of the damage of the drought. And I think that stuff was, 3 years ago, unfortunately, when we began, that was all present then. It's only gotten worse now. Then COVID happened where, suddenly we all became kind of connected and disconnected simultaneously, connected by the Zoom windows, and disconnected because, we couldn't see anybody. So all those things went into the blender of, I think, what the show ended up becoming, ultimately what the show ended up becoming about. So it really was sort of like, oh, what is happening in the world and how can we filter that into our story without making a show that sort of take your medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't seen a show like this that has this sense of urgency about climate change, but rarely, the words climate change never come up that I've seen so far. It feels like the stakes are super high, and they really are. And I think that's what I really, really responded to so far in watching the show. Also, the premise is effectively that the future of the Earth is in the hands of this alien who arrives here in a pivotal moment in our history. And the alien Faraday is observing humanity and slowly starts to adapt to how we behave. And I'm curious as to what you think the show is trying to say about us as human beings.
I mean, it's besides Alex and Jenny who created it, and there were 5 writers in the writers' room, including myself. Every one of those writers had a different point of view about that very question, because every writer we had was from a different socioeconomic background or different gender, et cetera. So we all kind of tried to approach the Faraday character is sort of, okay, well, if he's absorbing this information, how is it being processed and then put back out into the world? Well, at the same time, we have to tell a narrative. The first rule is entertain. Like I said, we were hyper careful about don't make this show about taking your medicine. That's why you don't hear climate change. Don't make it about, well, let's ramrod our politics. I shouldn't say it. So it's not even our politics, if I'm being honest. It's like, let's not ramrod our point of view about what's happening down everyone's throat. And also, it's not entertaining. I mean, it is maybe if Aaron Sorkin does it, because he has a certain way he can do it. That wasn't the story we wanted to tell necessarily. So, for us, it was a constant sort of like, what can Faraday reflect in this? Now you see in the pilot, he starts off, obviously he lands as an alien, then they cut to where he's going to end up. And it was by definition, it's supposed to be very different. Like he's arriving in one way and was always to us, well, what if Steve Jobs was an alien? Like if you look at these people in the world who have really turned the world, I mean, you almost can't even think about the world anymore without an iPhone or without some kind of smartphone. It's almost, and so that's a world-changing event. And we started thinking, okay, well, what if, the idea was, well, what if Steve Jobs wasn't human? What if he had come from somewhere else? Because he brought this kind of big turn. Edison, I could name a few more. There's sort of people that have made the big turn, Martin Luther King Jr., et cetera. We went down the line and went, okay, well, if we looked at those people, where would those people have started to learn how to become human, to then learn, as he says in the pilot, as Bill Nighy says, as Newton, I'm going to make you into the God they can't deny. Because part of the iPhone sell was Steve Jobs. It was the black turtleneck and the jeans and the way he did his presentations. It was, yes, the device was sort of crazy. It changed, you could sense right away you were at a world, but it also was delivered in a way that, there's a lot of people, if you Google it right now, there's a lot of people that are offering a lot of different choices on how to help the climate. But it took someone like Elon Musk, love him or hate him, to put something out into the world that suddenly people are like, oh, hey, it's cool to drive an electric car now. There were electric cars before the Tesla, but he made it cool. I think what we realized the long way around the horn to answer your question is, in order to get humans to kind of take their medicine, you got to deliver it in a very cool package.
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly is that. Obviously, you're a writer on the show, but what do you bring to the table in guiding and shepherding and supporting the creative vision for the show as the showrunner?
The job is different for everyone. In this particular case, since I didn't write the pilot, my job was to sort of put my shoulder down and push forward and push the writer's room, bring a bunch of ideas out, break those stories, present them to Alex and Jenny, get approval on those, re-break them, Then as we moved into casting, help with the casting, and then in production, I was in London the entire time where we shot it. I was there for prep and production. This is not stuff that any other showrunner wouldn't do. It was 200 days of filming for 10 episodes. It was through COVID, which was unfortunate for a bunch of reasons, but it's like such an amazing cast. We were so lucky. A, it was great material for them to react to, but B, that they were available, that as you and I were discussing earlier, Rob Delaney, who just happens to live in the UK, like that was one of those things that I think wouldn't have happened if he, wasn't right there. So it was about bringing those elements together, and then supporting Alex and Jenny and making sure that the vision of the show sort of matched where we started in November of 2018. I think that's when we started. Yeah. 2019. I could be wrong. It's been so, as all of us have like COVID brain, like I don't even quite remember when we began, but It was just about making sure that like that vision was delivered.
Yeah, well, congrats so far on a really compelling series, John, and thank you for your time today. We'll bring you right back now for our group chat.
Great, thank you.